sometimes these carols come to us by a very serendipitous and a very roundabout way. In the early 1800s, an 8-year-old boy by the name of Placide Capro was playing with a playmate. They unfortunately had a gun. And the gun went off and ripped through Placido's hand to the point that he had to have it amputated. Now what's this have to do with a carol? Because it builds up. The playmate's father felt responsible for this and therefore agreed to pay for Placido's education, which he did. And he got a good education, and he went eventually to law school, becoming a lawyer. As time went on and his parents became elderly, he moved back to his hometown of Rochemore to be with them. And because of his education and his legal training, he started a company which sold Côte d'Aron wines. And in the course of this business, he had to do a lot of traveling by stagecoach or by carriage. To entertain himself, since there were no CDs or MP players then, he started to write poetry, and he became somewhat known for writing his poetry. About the same time, a couple came to live in Rochemore, the name of Pierre and Emily Laurie. He was an engineer who was going to build a suspension bridge across the Rhone River. She was a singer who started singing in various locales around the area. One night, because they had a new organ in the church, the parish priest, Eugene Nicholas, came to Placido and asked him if he would write a poem that they could put to music. So he thought about this. It was a little difficult because he wasn't a churchgoer. He wasn't a Christian. He didn't go to church. But he did know something about the Bible, so he looked up Luke chapter 2 and thought about this on a stagecoach ride on December 3rd, 1847. On a stagecoach ride from his hometown to Paris, France. And he thought about 2 or 3 things. He thought about what the world was like when the time when Christ was supposed to be born. The Roman legions in control of the land, Herod keeping the Jewish people under his thumb, Caesar calling a census. How stressful that must have been to the Jewish people at that time. And then he thought also of what was going on in his own world in 1847, the Mexican-American War, the war in Switzerland, a war in Algeria, the famine in Ireland, a ship which was carrying immigrants from Ireland to Canada sank with only 3 survivors. A second ship sank off the coast of Ireland with only about 15 survivors. And the same year, a third ship sank in the Gulf in Lake Michigan with over 200 people lost. He was thinking of how stressed the world was with all of these things going on, and he wrote a poem. And when he got to Paris, he took it to a friend of his by the name of Adolphe Adam to put it to music. But Mr. Adam was not a Christian either. In fact, he was a Jew and didn't even celebrate Christmas. And he didn't want to have anything to do with it. But he was a friend of Mrs. Laurie, Emily Laurie. And so he decided he'd make a composition because of her. And he did. And he put on it that this was composed primarily for Mrs. Laurie. They went back to the hometown, and she did sing it that Christmas Eve, 21 days later, in her church, to rave reviews. It became very popular throughout France, almost as popular as Silent Night was in Germany. It came across the Atlantic, and a Unitarian minister decided to translate it into English because he was concerned about the slavery that was going on in the Americas. It became very popular in North America. At the same time, it was banned in France because it had been composed by a non-Christian and by a Jew. That didn't stop it from being sung, however. It was still sung in most of the churches. It has become one of the most popular carols that we have. It is said that in 1907, Franco-Prussian War, during the Franco-Prussian War, that someone got out of the French side during the middle of the fighting and started singing this carol. Someone from the German side started singing another carol to the point that hostilities stopped for 24 hours on Christmas Eve that year. A student of Edison, when working on the wireless on Christmas Eve, played the violin and sent this carol as the first carol ever played on radio in the world. It has become a very important piece of Christmas. The point of this is that God took a one-handed wine merchant who was not a Christian and a Jewish man who did not celebrate Christmas and let them compose one of the greatest Christmas carols of all time. And had it translated by a Unitarian minister who does not believe in the Trinity. If God can do this with people such as this and can take a carol and make it into one of his masterpieces, think what he can do with all of us if we just let him.
Yes.
And that is something to think about. And we're going to play the carol.